Charter Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerantz. We are joined today by Terry Moulton. He is a member of the Wisconsin State Senate. He is now a co-chair, a founder of the Wisconsin Sportsmen's Caucus. Congratulations, sir. One would have thought Wisconsin would have had one, but that's okay. You were part of the team that launched it in 2015. How did it happen?
Yes, and I'm very excited about that. You're right. I don't know why we hadn't been part of this caucus in the past.
It's national, by the way.
It's national.
Right.
We are now the 45th state who have joined the National Sportsmen's Caucus, and I'm excited about it. It's a bipartisan effort.
Right, and let's talk about that, because that could be the most inspiring part of the caucus. I was speaking with a member of the state Senate, a Democrat, and she was just as effusive about the caucus as you, who happen to be a member of the Republican Party.
Yes, and that's a great thing about it. You know, we're people who care about outdoor
Right.
recreation and hunting and fishing, and we can get together and talk about things we agree on.
And I want to talk about outdoor recreation. You know, when I was a kid, when you were a kid, the outdoors was so much part of our existence, even if we lived in urban or suburban areas. But now, look, I have two daughters, 13 and 11. All they're on is their iPhones, and it's frustrating. I want to say, get out of the house, put your phone down, and enjoy the outdoors. How can you, as a member of the Sportsman Caucus, convince our kids, our grandkids, that the outdoors has so much to offer?
Well, I know exactly what you're,
Right.
what you're talking about, because I've got grandkids
So
who
you-
are
right.
right here all the time.
Right.
But I think that one of the keys is getting those kids out.
Right.
Getting them out. Every one of my grandkids is an archer. Has gotten into hunting and fishing. I've taken my grandkids fishing.
Yeah, tell us about that.
So we get them out there.
I want to hear, I really, like, in the depth of your core, and I don't mean to get too, woo-woo on you, if you know what I'm saying, but what's it like for, Grandpa Moulton to sit there with his grandkids and, enjoy the outdoors, hunting, fishing, hiking, whatever you're doing?
Well, it's really exciting, and I developed a love for fishing because my dad took me as a small kid on some western Montana trout streams.
Wow.
And when you're out there in the woods and there's no phones, there's nobody else around, you can just bond with your grandkids, with your kids, and it's just
there's nothing like
you
it.
You can't describe it, really.
And what's nice about your advocacy of the sportsman's world is not only are you advocating as a member of the legislature, but you also are a small businessman. And you own two businesses that focus on the great outdoors. Tell us about those businesses.
Yeah, I took two childhood passions,
Okay.
archery and fishing, and turned them into two businesses. I have an archery pro shop and fishing tackle retail business, and then we have a fishing tackle manufacturing business. And it's directed primarily towards muskie lures, but we also make some lures that are sold in the bass market. In 1978, I was blessed to introduce a lure in the market called the hog wobbler.
Oh my!
It took off. It became a muskie classic.
Oh, you're kidding!
I've sold them all over the world.
Who would have thunk?
Yeah, so
right.
It's been a labor of love, really.
So one of the first issues that was brought to the fore by the Sportsman's Caucus is the question of clothing for deer hunting. Who would have thunk that somehow the color of clothing for deer hunting would get so much play in press? But currently, we see deer hunters wearing blaze orange, and it's really for their protection. But there have been some discussions about opening the color spectrum to blaze pink. I was speaking with a member recently who had gone and looked at a spectrometer and saw that pink actually is pretty effective in terms of visual eyesight. Well, at the same time, the deer can't see the pink. And so talk to us about this blaze orange, blaze pink controversy, if there is one.
Well, I don't really understand why there'd be a controversy. We're losing hunters in Wisconsin over the last several years. And right now, 3 to 1 new hunters are women versus men.
Fascinating, right.
And in my business, I see women coming in buying pink bows, buying pink releases, having fletching put on their arrows that it's pink. So this is kind of about recruitment.
Right.
And we're not mandating that anyone has to wear fluorescent pink.
Yeah, okay.
We're just providing as another option.
Right.
We had a researcher look into this,
Right.
and fluorescent pink, blaze pink, is just as visible, if not more visible, than fluorescent orange.
And so, as we speak today, are we going to see that legislation march through the legislature? I mean, anything could happen.
Anything can happen
Right.
with legislation, but we're hopeful. I just don't know what the opposition may end up being. I was concerned initially about safety, but the
Right.
research has proven it's very visible. So we'll see what happens.
Here's another interesting issue that one would not expect to have to come to the fore, but it did. So apparently, when an organization wants to donate certain types of game, in Wisconsin, the law had been they could only donate venison. I mean, it's like, where do these laws come from and how did this happen? But, so you looked into this. Talk to us about the background of this law and what you're doing to try to clean up this legislation.
Well, since 2000, yes, we've been able, sportsmen and women across Wisconsin have been able to donate venison, deer,
Right.
to the county, the local counties, and then they get it processed and it's given to charities and food pantries around the state. Good thing. 80,000 deer in the
Right.
last few years have been donated.
Sure, and let me tell you, deer, a lot of meat. I've learned that. A lot of meat on deer.
3 million
Yeah.
pounds of venison
Right.
have gone to
Right.
food pantries. So we thought in Wisconsin, last year alone, I think we harvested 33,000 turkeys.
Right.
So why not be able to allow sportsmen and women to donate turkeys to the
This
food
is
pantry?
America.
So it's just
how do we
common
not
sense.
allow the donation of turkeys?
Yeah.
I mean, do you know the history of how it wound up? It was limited to venison. Was there like the venison organization?
I think maybe it had to do, we weren't always that well known for harvesting turkeys.
I see.
And since they've been introduced into Wisconsin, they've grown and multiplied
I
across
see.
the state. So now there is a vast number of people that hunt turkeys.
And so, has this legislation passed? Are we done with the turkey venison debate?
We haven't.
We're getting there. It's
We're
okay.
getting
It's all
we're
good.
getting-
It's all good.
we're
But
getting
it looks as if we're going to march down that
Yeah,
path and
yeah.
kind of open the floodgates. I do want to ask you about an interesting element that was presented by Governor Walker. And here's another example of how, when you deal with outdoorsmen, there's no partisan divisions. Governor Walker had talked about eliminating the Department of Natural Resources. Boy, that didn't go over very well with Democrats and Republicans in Wisconsin. Talk to me about that and why that was kind of a unifying force for the Sportsman's Caucus.
Well, his proposal was to take away some of the authority of
Right.
the DNR board.
Right, yeah. Well,
and,
better stated.
and we felt that really wasn't something that we wanted to do. That we felt there needs to be that transparency or that check and balance in the system
Right.
between the Department of Natural Resources, the DNR board, and the governor's office. So there was a lot of pushback on that
Clearly.
proposal. Yes.
So talk to me about your view of how this caucus will help to breed camaraderie, collegiality, because it does. I mean, literally, when I was talking to Senator Janet Bewley, a Democrat, I mean, her eyes lit up, and it was as if like the sun and the clouds had opened. I mean, there is something about this that really brings Democrats and Republicans together.
Well, I think anytime you talk to a sportsman who's into fishing and hunting, they're all alike, regardless of what
Right.
side of the political aisle you're
Right.
on. If you have a love for fishing and hunting,
Right.
you can bond with somebody else that has similar
But
likes.
I'm wondering if this can help to breed more. I mean, look, you're all friends in the end, but still continue to breed that collegiality, that camaraderie that folks believe is not in government. Whether it is or not is another story. But
I think some of the events that we could possibly have
Right.
would go a long ways towards
Right.
towards overcoming some of these polarizations.
Exactly.
Get together with a few guys in the boat, out on an outdoor excursion or
maybe
something.
they'll wear blaze pink.
Yeah, maybe we can all wear blaze pinks.
Exactly. His name is Terry Moulton. He is a member of the Wisconsin State Senate. He is the new chair of the Sportsman's Caucus. My name is Brad Pomeroy. It's Charter Local Edition. Fantastic. You're watching Charter Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerantz. We are joined by Devin Lemachue. He is a member of the Wisconsin State Senate, a new member, in fact. I want to get a sense from you, sir. What made you decide to run for office? You have a small business in your community, but you decided to come down to Madison. What made you decide to do that?
Yeah, it was a very interesting election time last year. My representative didn't run again in the assembly, and then my senator at the time jumped into the congressional seat with Congressman Petri retiring. So first my assemblyman didn't run again.
Right.
So I had announced for the assembly seat, and then after my senator, Joe Leibum, jumped into the congressional race, then I had to make that decision whether to jump into the Senate race or.
So what made you pick the Senate over the Assembly? Because there are pluses and minuses to both. The Senate, of course, a body of 33, the Assembly, a body of 99.
You know, my dad was in the Assembly at the time, and he told me I was crazy to run for the Senate.
Okay.
Because it's
Is he still there?
No, he did not run again this last session either.
That's the member who didn't run.
No, he was in a different Assembly seat.
Although it would have been fun to have a father-son situation. Have we had that yet in Wisconsin?
I am not sure. We have brothers.
Okay.
Well, one in the Senate and Assembly with the Fitzgeralds, but.
So why did he say don't go for the Senate? What made him be so convinced that the Assembly was the body to aspire?
I think when you're part of something, he was in the Assembly for 12 years, and I think being in the Assembly for 12 years, he saw the advantages of maybe a district that's not quite as large and the demands on someone who is a state representative. But the reason I decided to run for the Senate is, you know, you're a 1 in 33 voices instead of 1 in 99, so you have a little bit more sway over what you can get done, and you only have to run for re-election every 4 years.
That is true. So talk to us about how it's been. You've been there for about 6 months. Wisconsin, it's been an exciting, 4 or 5 years, I guess, and there's still a lot of excitement going on in this great state. Talk to us about it.
Well, being brand new in the Senate I found it to be very challenging right away, because you jump in, at least I was a local on the county board, Sheboygan County Board, for 9 years, so at least gave me a little bit, and having a father who was in the Assembly gives you a little bit of knowledge ahead of time, but when you just jump full board into a budget session, right to work debate, things like that. It was very challenging to learn about all the different agencies in the state government and make all the different contacts. And
what's interesting about your tenure so far is you chose to really focus on some very specific issues that were specific to your district, your community. One of them being the speed limit.
Right.
I mean, it seems like, well, why is this issue in the fore? But it matters. It matters especially in your community.
I think the more rural you get in Wisconsin, the more important an issue like that is. In our area, we find that people commute, the average commute time is over 20 minutes. And 5 miles an hour only saves 1 or 2 minutes, but it's an extra couple minutes. Our roads are built to handle 85, 90 miles an hour, so it just makes sense to let people drive who can drive safely on these interstates.
Was it a tricky issue to get through? I mean, there's no doubt that throughout the Midwest, throughout the country, there is this move to increase the speed limit, kind of a reverse of what we saw 20, 30 years ago. But were you able to build that coalition, bipartisan coalition, as well with the executive branch?
Right. We didn't have a challenge with the executive branch. And we didn't have a challenge in the Assembly. The challenge was actually in the Senate.
Interesting.
Which is where it died last session. And there was sort of a sticking point over whether to include 4-lane roads that had at-grade crossings, which are essentially driveways and stop signs coming up to it. And ultimately, the original bill just let the DOT decide on 4-lane highways based on their safety studies, which we thought made sense. But there was a couple members in the Senate who wanted to make sure that it couldn't be raised up to 70 if there were at-grade crossings. So we finally, after talking to the DOT, we realized that they probably weren't going to put many of these roads up to 70 anyways because of the safety risks of cross traffic going across. So
what do you think of that whole process, the collaborative process, working with an agency, working with other members? You were on the Sheboygan board, but that's obviously a much smaller body. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, being in local government, it's a little different because you don't have that partisan label on you. I mean, granted,
people know
know what direction you're coming from, but you're tasked to work together, and you usually find consensus. broad consensus at the local level. And so yeah, it was a little different working.
Right.
It was a good learning process for the future.
Another issue that you tackled, again, from your press release, not the sexiest, but important,
Right.
important to your constituents.
Right.
And that dealt with, the local raffle.
Right.
You want to do a fundraiser, and yet who knew raffles were filled with red tape.
Right.
And somehow you decided we needed to get through this. How are you made aware that there was a problem?
Well, actually, my predecessor, Joe Leibum, worked on this bill last
Got it.
session, and it's the only bill that the governor has actually vetoed in the last in his last term. Because
Why?
The last bill had some language in that may have conflicted with the gaming compacts.
Interesting.
With the tribes, so
Interesting.
he vetoed it, but. During the campaign, you learn to talk about, jobs and the economy.
Right.
And I would go to these conservation groups or sportsman groups, and they'd ask me about the raffle bill.
It's fascinating,
And
right.
So I had to go to my campaign staff
Right.
and say, what in the world are they talking? What's up with this raffle bill?
Exactly.
So after I did a little research on it, it just made sense. So after I was elected, I looked into who was running the bill in the assembly, because
Right.
it didn't have a Senate lead at the time, and said, can we get this reworked and done?
So what did you have to do to avoid a veto, essentially?
Yeah, the language that was the challenge was it's other games of chance was
I
listed
see,
in there.
right.
So instead of having it that broad, we narrowly defined what is all permissible, what different types of raffles are permissible in the state of Wisconsin by these nonprofit groups. And it's just so important for these groups, the Rotaries, the sportsman clubs.
It's the little things.
Because that's how
It's the
they
little things.
raise almost all their money for their
Right.
budgets, and that's how all that cash goes back into the
Right.
communities for protecting the environment or youth clubs,
Right.
things like that.
So you march into the Senate and you become chair of the Elections Committee,
Right.
which I'm sure you would think wouldn't necessarily be controversial, but there's always controversy surrounding elections. There's a lot of discussion about redistricting, how lines are drawn. Is it too partisan? Is it hyper-partisan? Talk to us about getting thrown into that maelstrom.
Well, I think redistricting will be on the back burner at this point, but there's a lot of other interesting things that might come before Elections Committee during this session. Campaign finance.
Right.
A lot of our campaign finance law has been found unconstitutional by the Wisconsin Supreme Court and
Right.
the U.S. Supreme Court. So we need to make sure that we can update it so candidates know what
Right.
is permissible and
Yeah,
what is
that
not
would be helpful.
permissible.
Right.
There's talk about reforming the GAB. If you've listened to any political sources, so talk of reforming the GAB, talk of John Doe reform. There's been a bill introduced
Right.
already about reforming that. So a lot of those issues will potentially be coming before the Elections Committee. I think it's a good committee for a freshman, as they call me, or
Right.
a rookie like
Right.
myself to be
Right.
on, because it's something that's easily to understand and get your mind grasped around elections.
But what's interesting is it impacts your fellow colleagues in the
Right.
legislature so much.
Right.
So it's like, the raffle bill, that impacts certain constituencies, whereas the elections, it impacts all of you.
True.
And so there's a high interest level in
Right.
your committee. And so talk to me about the learning curve. Can't be easy.
Well, it helped that my chief of staff in my office clerked that committee last session for the previous
Right.
chairperson of
No doubt.
that committee. So that was probably one of the reasons why I ended up chairing that committee, is that I had someone with a lot of expertise in my office to help me out. So
Well, all I have to say is congratulations on your new position. His name is Devin Lemieux. He is a member of the Wisconsin State Senate. My name is Brad Palmer. You're watching Charter Local Edition. It's Charter Local Edition. My name is Brad Pomerantz. We are joined today by Dave Heaton. He is a member of the Wisconsin State Assembly. And sir, I've always believed that so much of how someone sees policy depends on from where they came. And you, in some ways, are fairly unique. Maybe 100 years ago, not as unique, but you are one of 15 children, 15 siblings. Talk to us about growing up as being one of 15.
Well, that's right, Brad, and thank you for having me
Please,
on.
please.
Growing up in a family of 15 kids, you learn early on how to negotiate.
Well stated, and you need to know that in the
Yeah.
assembly of 99.
Absolutely. You learn how to, more importantly, work together as a team.
Right.
You learn that there are things that are larger than yourself, and my parents made a lot of sacrifices to try and make our lives better than theirs. And
It's
to teach
very
us
moving. It's very moving.
Yeah, they truly did, and to teach us about service. And so it certainly laid the groundwork for me to be working very hard towards educational improvement and kind of lifting yourself up by your own bootstraps and trying to help those who you can help.
And let's talk about that. But I do want to ask you before we get into the policy, forgive me, I'm interested in the personal story. You're 14 out of 15. That had to be tricky. I mean, to be the 14th with, 13 ahead of you. How was that for you?
Well, yeah, that's true. I was at the lower end of the pecking order, and it certainly, you learn how to use what little leverage you have.
Very little.
To
But it's
get
perfect.
things done.
You're in the assembly now. You're going to need a new member, so you're at the bottom of the pecking order. So talk to me, sir, about how it is to be a new member of an august body. 1599. It's close, same navigation.
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, other than marrying my wife, Stephanie, and the birth of my 3 beautiful children, it's the greatest honor of my life to be serving the people of the 85th Assembly District. And yes, it's been a exciting time. This is a time where we are trying to continue to improve the state's economy. We're trying to improve and maintain a good, strong educational system.
So what made you decide, though, to run for office? These are interesting times indeed. Wisconsin is known for its collegiality, its friendliness, but this decade's been tricky in the Capitol. Is that fair to say? And so, you stepped into a cauldron a bit, in the best sense, but talk to us about that decision.
Well, when I decided to run for office, it's because I wanted to continue to make central Wisconsin and the state of Wisconsin as a whole the greatest place to live. I wanted to help create and maintain that environment that helps businesses thrive, which in turn helps families thrive. The two need each other. And so that I want my kids to be able to have a good job when they get old enough to enter the workforce. And so that's one of the primary reasons, so I can help create a better life for the children in my district, including my own.
So I guess it shouldn't be a surprise to most of us that you were appointed to the Committee on Children and Families. Sure. You know from children, you know from families. And so given your desires, it's clear where your mission is, education in the future. How are you using membership on that committee to further the goals?
Yes, and being on the Committee of Children and Families, we have an opportunity to help in terms of child support enforcement. There's some issues that we're dealing with on that front, but it's focused on families, and it's focused in particular on helping those families who have special challenges. And so I am honored to be on that committee. I look forward to using my background both in my personal life, but also in my legal and business background to help move things forward for families in Wisconsin.
I want to talk about education more. As you know, when the governor offered his proposal for K-12 education, he was looking at cuts. But the majority party, of which you're a member, came together and decided that is not where they wanted to take Wisconsin. And in the end, the budget looks to not only not cut, but increase a bit spending on K-12. Talk to us about why that became a priority for the majority party, especially when, fairly popular governor was looking the other way.
Well, I think from the beginning, and even when I was running, education was a priority, K through 12 in particular, and it strikes close to home because I have all my 3 children, they're 6 years and under. Okay?
Oh, you're kidding.
The
story gets even more insane. I mean, you got 3 kids under 6, you're in Madison. You're the man. You're the man, Mr. Heaton, but keep going.
But and the like-minded legislators in the Assembly who want to continue to make K through 12 and education in our state a priority are working to continue to do that. And that requires many things. One of them is to make sure that our schools are adequately funded, to make sure that those resources, to the extent we can get those resources into the classroom, where they're needed most.
Right.
These are the priorities that the folks that I've been working with in the legislature have focused on.
I mean, it's a pretty bold statement and bold move for the majority party with a governor of the same party to come out and say, look, budget times are tight, but this is what we want to do, and we're going to stick to this. Not easy, not easy.
Well, it shows that your legislature recognizes that education is critical to the growth of our state, to the, education and the economy are intertwined, okay? We need a good, well-educated, well-trained workforce to meet the needs of our local businesses and to compete in what is becoming a more and more global economy. So education is key there, and that's why it's been my priority and the priority of my colleagues in the Assembly to focus on education. Secondly, we've listened to our constituents. We've had countless, well, I won't say countless, but over 100 listening sessions where Wisconsin legislators have listened to the desires of their community. And one of those things that came out loud and clear was the people of Wisconsin want to keep and continue to have a good, strong education system in our state.
Let me ask you, if I may, about the University of Wisconsin system, which has really become a crown jewel in this state. I mean, Wisconsin is not only popular, and I'll focus on Madison, and I know there are a lot of wonderful campuses throughout the state, but when you look at Wisconsin, Madison, that is a national institution that attracts students from all across the nation. And so when you look at funding for Wisconsin, the institution, that was also a little tricky through this budget cycle. There had been some suggestions that maybe the administration on the university side was hiding a little money. And so talk to us about how that played out. Because Governor Walker, for example, is looking maybe to change the governance structure. It's got to be tricky.
Well, again, the higher education is critical to the growth of this state and the continuing our educational initiatives in the state to continue to compete nationally and globally. We need good higher education.
Right.
That includes our technical colleges, which
Well
are
stated.
in our local UW two-year colleges throughout the state, and that also includes our flagship University of Wisconsin.
I'm glad you brought that up because it is so easy to focus just on the flagship. And how do you make sure that the local colleges, the 2 years, the technicals, get the love they deserve?
Yeah, and they do deserve, because they are serving communities and they're serving students and families that don't have the option to go to, for example, a big four-year university.
Especially a university that is so popular nationally now. Sure. I mean, it's not that easy to get into Madison these days, in-state or out-of-state.
No, it's not. Yeah. And for example, the technical colleges, and what I say about a great education system, it has to be robust, it has to be diverse, because we have different needs to meet. The technical colleges do an excellent job. I have North Central Technical College. I'm honored to have it in the middle of my district, and it is a great example of how our technical colleges are meeting the needs of our local businesses and our local communities. They tailor their curricula to meet the needs of the local communities, and they serve in those areas where we really have students who are living close by, that they can have easy access, and they're affordable.
You'll come back? So. He's Dave Heaton, I'm Brad Pomerantz. This is Charter Local Edition.